The softball shrimp has been my go-to fly for redfish for years, and it's a great fly for drum and anything else you might find on the flats. It has an excellent blend of natural and synthetic materials that make it durable and still irresistible to the fish. Go ahead and take your jig hook and place it in the vise. You'll want to put a solid thread base down, so wrap from the front to the back of the hook with nice tight wraps. I'm using 4mm lead eyes, but you can use bead chain eyes or pretty much any weight you prefer. Use tight X wraps and even some under wraps to really cinch down on the eyes. You can see how bringing the thread underneath the eyes but staying on top of the hook shank really cinches all those threads together. Now we're going to use the Starbond medium thick flexible super glue. I found that this glue stands up to being bashed against rocks a lot better than the regular super glue. And you're going to put it on the top and the bottom of the eyes so that the super glue goes around the hook shank and bonds to itself. If you don't want to wait for the super glue to set, or if you don't want to risk getting any of the glue on the materials, go ahead and use some instant accelerator to make the super glue harden up right away. Next, we're going to take some extra long tan craft fur and snip off a small amount. Pull out the long fibers and taper the craft fur in your hands, and then clean up the other side with your scissors, but don't cut too much off because you'll want to tie in a little bit of the under fur to keep the taper just right. Hold the craft fur on top of the hook shank and stroke the fibers back on either side of the hook point. Once you have the fibers aligned on either side of the hook, you can transfer the craft fur into your other hand and then capture the fibers with your bobbin right at the back of the hook. Wrap tightly over the craft fur and give it a nice clean base. Now I'll do a quick whip finish so I can take the fly out of the vise and add the barring to the craft fur. I use a template that I designed and 3D printed so that I can get perfect barring every time. It's definitely not necessary, but I think it gives the fly a more professional look since the bars are evenly spaced the whole way down. Once you're done adding the bars, you're ready to put the fly back in the vise. Now we'll rotate the fly over and start our thread again. Next, we're going to cut a small portion of red foxtail fur. I like to use about the same amount of fox fur as I do the craft fur. Hold the tips tightly in one hand and remove as much of the under fur as you can. I like to give it a little bit of a taper as well. Now tie in the fox fur the exact same way you tied in the craft fur. Clean up the loose fibers with some tight thread wraps. Next, grab a pheasant feather and begin to palmer that right in front of the fox. You want the feather to curve towards the back of the fly so that the fibers will lay down nice and flat. Trim the tag end and then stroke all the fibers back before you begin to wrap your thread. Make sure that you really clean up the tag end and make a nice even place for you to tie in the rubber legs. Now grab your favorite color of rubber legs. You're going to select one full-length rubber leg and then cut it in half. Take one of those halves and wrap it around the thread, matching the tips of the rubber legs up. Hold the legs in your left hand and then let the legs slide up the thread until you can pinch them against the shaft of the hook. Wrap back over the legs until you're right in front of the feather you tied in. Now do the same thing on the opposite side. I like to twist the legs with my left hand as I'm tying this pair in to keep it from laying on top of each other. Capture the legs and wrap back to in front of the feather, and make sure you don't mess up the legs you tied on the near side. Next, we're going to take some sculpting fibers and lay them out to make a dubbing loop. Snip off a length of sculpting fibers and then begin to lay them out on the table in slightly decreasing sizes. You'll want to separate the fibers as you lay it out so that it doesn't get too clumped up in any one spot. For this fly, I'm mixing tan and orange to make the dubbing loop. Finally, you're going to add some angel hair flash right over top of the sculpting fibers. You don't have to be too careful about matching the size up perfectly. This stuff is really light and wispy, so it's easy to trim later. Make your dubbing loop and then grab a dubbing loop twister and slide it into the loop you just made. Carefully transfer the materials into the dubbing loop. This can be quite tricky, but with practice it's not too bad. Keep tension on the dubbing loop and carefully spread the material out within it. You can give the material a quick trim while it's in the loop, but you'll also trim the fly at the end, so it's not really necessary. Now spin up the dubbing loop. Be careful not to let the rubber legs get caught in the loop while it's spinning. Brush the loop with a dog brush to keep it from getting clumped up while you're spinning it. Once you feel that the brush is ready, go ahead and start wrapping it with tight, touching wraps. I'll hold the rubber legs out of the way as I make the first couple wraps. Wrap the brush right up to behind the eyes and then capture it with your thread. Make sure you wiggle the thread back and forward as you go through the brush to keep it from trapping all the fibers down. Stroke the fibers back and then build up a small thread dam to keep everything in place. Now you can add your whip finish and get ready to finish off the fly. I like to trim the bottom of the fly flush to start with. Then I'll flip the fly over and hold the rubber legs back and trim the top of the fly. I'll keep my scissors at about a 45-degree angle to the shank of the hook and trim all the way across. Finally, add some head cement to give it a nice glossy finish and for durability, and you're done. I hope you guys enjoy this fly as much as I have. Thank you for watching, and go tie it up and try it for yourselves.